The alien princess slipped toward death, until a human warrior paid the final price. Among them, the royal cruiser Celestara glided silently, its sleek silver hull reflecting distant suns. Inside, Princess Lysera of the Xantari Empire sat in the observation deck, her hands pressed lightly against the glass. Her pale blue eyes followed the stars, each one a reminder of her people's centuries of exploration and peacekeeping. She had been traveling to the far reaches of the Orion expanse for diplomatic talks. The journey was meant to strengthen alliances and ensure that trade routes remained safe from pirates and rogue factions. But even as she admired the beauty of the cosmos, there was a tension she could feel in the air, a subtle hum of unease. Something wasn't right. The first warning came as a flicker on the cruiser's sensors. Small, fast-moving ships appeared at the edge of detection. Lysera's heart skipped. Unauthorized vessels approaching, her comm system whispered in a calm, mechanical tone. She had learned to trust the ship's systems, but instinct told her this wasn't a routine encounter. Within seconds, the cruiser's alarms blared. Red lights bathed the deck in a warning glow. Lysera's trained mind raced. Shields up. Prepare evasive maneuvers, she commanded, her voice steady despite the rising fear in her chest. From the cockpit, Captain Orland's voice was tense. Princess, they're moving fast, too fast, it looks like an ambush. Lysera's stomach tightened. Pirates or mercenaries rarely dared to attack a royal cruiser. Its defense systems were formidable. But these ships were different. Sleek, black, and agile, they moved with deadly precision, striking the cruiser's shields in sudden bursts. Sparks flew along the hull as energy blasts struck, sending shudders through the entire vessel. The cruiser shook violently. Lysera clutched the railing, her knuckles white. "Divert power to the rear thrusters," she shouted. The ship responded, veering sharply to avoid another strike. But the enemy was relentless, tracking their every movement. "Princess," Orland said, his voice tight with urgency, "we can't outrun them. They know this system better than we do." Lysera's mind worked quickly. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on her. Every life on board depended on her decisions now. "Prepare the escape pods," she ordered. "I will not let my people fall without a fight." The order went through the ship's comm, and crew members scrambled to their stations. Red lights flashed, sirens wailed, and the cruiser's sleek corridors filled with a tense energy. Lysera turned back to the observation deck window, the stars now streaking past in sharp lines as the ship accelerated. She spotted one of the escape pod's docking mechanism, already preparing for launch. But before she could reach it, a massive energy blast hit the cruiser's main hull. The floor beneath her feet shuddered violently. Panels exploded, sending sparks and debris flying. The observation deck twisted as gravity fluctuated, throwing Lysera against the wall. Pain shot through her arm, but she pushed herself up, gripping the railing. "Princess, the hull is compromised," Orland shouted, his voice echoing through the chaos. Lysera swallowed her fear. Her mind, trained for diplomacy and leadership, now had to function under the most extreme conditions. She could not allow panic to take over. The ship's systems were failing, but she had one chance to survive: escape. She ran toward the escape pod, dodging falling debris and flashes of fire. The air was thick with smoke, burning the back of her throat. Her hand slammed on the pod's control panel, fingers shaking as she initiated the launch sequence. The pod shuddered, lights flickering. A warning tone blared. "Life support compromised, hull integrity unstable." Lysera's pulse raced. The pod was her only chance. With a deep breath, she engaged the manual override. The hatch sealed behind her, and the pod shot away from the dying cruiser with a burst of thrusters. Outside, the scene was chaos. The cruiser spun, half its hull ripped apart, energy blasts still ricocheting in the void. The enemy ships circled like predators, waiting to strike again. Lysera watched through the pod's small viewport as her home and safety slipped away. She felt a cold fear settle in her chest. Alone, vulnerable, she was now at the mercy of space itself. The pod's life support systems struggled to stabilize. Alarms continued to blare, and a red light glowed ominously. Lysera pressed her hands against the console, trying to calm herself. She had survived crises before, but never like this. Out here, there were no allies, no backup, no reinforcements. Just her and the silent, infinite darkness. The pod's navigation system blinked a warning: trajectory unstable. Lysera realized she was falling toward a planet below, a rocky, storm-tossed world far from any major system. "No," she whispered. She tried to adjust the course, but the controls were sluggish. Systems damaged in the cruiser's attack were failing her now. A thunderous roar echoed in the distance. She glimpsed towering storm clouds swirling violently over jagged mountains. The pod shook, thrusters straining against the pull of gravity. Her training screamed at her to remain calm, but the fear clawed at her chest. She had to survive. She had no other choice. Far above, in orbit, another ship monitored the chaos. A human-led salvage vessel, the Vigilant, picked up Lysera's distress signal. Commander Kale, a seasoned human warrior known for his daring missions, studied the readouts with sharp eyes. "Distress pod detected," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "Location Orion Expanse, Sector 9, life support failing, pod descending fast." The crew around him froze. "It's a royal vessel," one of them whispered. "The sensors match the profile of Princess Lysera's cruiser." Kale didn't hesitate. "Plot intercept course, we're going in." The Vigilant jumped into faster-than-light travel, cutting the distance between itself and the falling pod. Kale's mind raced through every possible scenario. The odds of a successful rescue were slim, very slim, but retreat was not an option. Humans had earned a reputation for risking everything to protect life, even beyond their own species. Back in the pod, Lysera's condition worsened. Systems blinked red, oxygen levels dropping rapidly. She could barely think, let alone react, as turbulence from the planet's upper atmosphere tossed the pod like a leaf in a storm. Sparks flew from the damaged panels, the controls flickering between responsive and dead. Her thoughts turned inward to memories of her home, her people, the corridors of her palace, the laughter of her younger siblings. She hadn't thought her life would end like this, in a tiny pod falling toward an unknown planet with no one to save her. Yet even in the terror, a spark of hope remained. Someone had received her signal. Someone would come. And then in the distance, a sleek shape appeared. A human craft maneuvering through the storm, its thrusters flaring against the turbulent atmosphere. Kale's silhouette could be seen through the viewport of his cockpit, focused and unflinching. He was approaching fast, navigating debris, dodging energy discharges that might have destroyed lesser pilots. Lysera's heart lifted. Could it really be? Could someone actually reach her in time? She had heard stories of humans' courage, their willingness to sacrifice for others, but she had never imagined experiencing it firsthand. Kale's craft closed in, and he deployed his docking and rescue systems. The pod shook violently as the two vessels aligned. The magnetic clamps engaged, securing the pod for extraction. But the turbulence was too strong. Sparks flew. The pod's hull cracked under the stress. Kale's voice came over the calm and commanding. "Princess Lysera, this is Commander Kale. Hold on, I've got you." Lysera gritted her teeth. I don't know if I can," she gasped. "You can," Kale said, voice firm. "I've done worse, just hold on, I need you alive. The universe doesn't end with one life, not today." The pod shuddered, thrusters flaring to stabilize, as Kale's craft pulled with careful precision. But a massive storm cloud surged upward, gusting like a living creature. Lightning crackled across the sky, striking near the pod. The craft rocked violently, alarms blaring. Lysera screamed, the sound muffled by her helmet as the pod tilted dangerously. Kale's hands were steady on the controls, eyes scanning instruments, calculating angles and velocities in a fraction of a second. "We're almost there," he muttered. "Just a little more." Time seemed to stretch, every second a lifetime, as the pod's hull began to crack further. Lysera's vision blurred, and the thought of death grew closer with each heartbeat. And yet, even as she felt the pull of despair, she could see the human craft closing in, a symbol of courage, of hope, and of the incredible lengths one being could go to save another. The first part of her journey toward death and uncertainty had begun. But somewhere in the void, a human warrior was willing to risk everything to change her fate. The storm-racked planet loomed below like a living, breathing danger. Jagged mountains clawed at the clouds, and lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the violent turbulence that shook Princess Lysera's escape pod. Every jolt sent pain through her body. The crash of the royal cruiser was still fresh in her mind, but now she faced a new challenge, surviving the descent to the planet's surface. Through the small viewport, she glimpsed the human craft moving toward her with incredible precision. Commander Kale piloted it as if the laws of physics bent to his will. The sleek vessel dodged lightning and gusting winds, its engines flaring against the chaotic atmosphere. Lysera's heart raced. For the first time in hours, she felt a faint spark of hope. Kale's voice came through the pod's damaged comm system, firm and calm. "Hold on, Princess. I've got a secure docking line. You'll be safe soon." Lysera nodded, though Kale could not see her. The pod's life support continued to falter. Oxygen levels were dangerously low, and warning lights blinked ceaselessly. She pressed her hands to the control panel, willing the systems to cooperate. Sparks flew across the console, and a small fire ignited near her foot. She stomped it out, breathing heavily. Kale's craft adjusted its trajectory, banking sharply to match the pod's rotation. "Steady, steady," he muttered. The human's focus was absolute. Every move was calculated, precise, and yet he seemed calm even as the storm threatened to rip the pod apart. Lysera watched, a mixture of fear and admiration swelling in her chest. Humans were reckless in stories she had heard, but here was proof of intelligence and courage beyond recklessness. The magnetic docking clamps extended from Kale's vessel. They shimmered with energy, seeking the pod, but turbulence struck again. A bolt of lightning hit the nearby atmosphere, sending a shockwave through the pod. It spun violently, knocking Lysera against the wall. Pain shot through her ribs, and she gasped, pressing herself against the floor to steady her body. "Princess, can you activate manual stabilization?" Kale's voice urged over the comm. Lysera gritted her teeth. I'll try," she replied. The controls were unresponsive at first, flickering between dead and alive, but her hands moved with precision. She engaged the thrusters, and the pod spun slightly, aligning itself with the docking clamps. Sparks flew and the console blinked red, but the pod had moved just enough for Kale's craft to catch it. Kale's ship shuddered as the magnetic clamps latched. "Got it! Hold tight," he said, though the craft tilted dangerously under the strain. The human's voice was steady, yet Lysera could hear the tension beneath it. Even the best pilot could not control the planet's violent storms perfectly. The two ships began to move in unison, but the pod's hull groaned under the force. Cracks spread across the metal, small fissures that could become fatal at any moment. Lysera pressed her forehead against the viewport, watching Kale's vessel fight the storm. Every second was a battle against nature itself. The storm intensified. Wind gusts buffeted the combined ships, and debris from the Rocky Mountains whirled upward, striking both vessels. Kale swore under his breath, hands flying across the controls. "Adjust thrusters. Compensate for lateral drift. We're almost there." Lysera fought to keep her fear in check. She had been trained to handle crises, but nothing had prepared her for this. She had seen destruction in distant systems, studied strategies, negotiated peace with hostile factions. But now, survival depended on one human warrior and her own faltering pod. Minutes felt like hours. The planet's surface grew closer, revealing jagged peaks and a storm-tossed valley below. Kale's ship dipped and rose, dodging lightning strikes and gusts of wind. The magnetic clamps strained, the energy field flickering under the pressure. "Hold, hold," Kale gritted through clenched teeth. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the sealed cockpit. The ship's hull creaked under the force, and the pod rattled violently. Lysera's fingers pressed against the console, white with tension. The life support systems continued to falter, and her oxygen meter showed dangerously low levels. Then disaster struck. A massive bolt of lightning struck the mountainside, sending a shockwave that slammed into the pod. It spun violently, the hull groaning and cracking further. Lysera screamed, the sound muffled inside her helmet. Panels exploded around her, sending shards of metal spinning in zero gravity. Kale reacted instantly. His ship banked sharply, shields flaring, engines straining as he compensated for the blast. He locked the magnetic clamps, holding the pod with every ounce of strength he could muster. "Princess, I've got you. Don't let go." Lysera's hands were steady now, pressing thrusters, adjusting angles, trying to help even as her body shook with fear and exhaustion. Sparks flew across the cockpit, a small fire igniting near her console. She stomped it out, breathing heavily. Every second brought her closer to safety or death. Kale's voice broke through her panic. "Almost, just a few more meters." The pod's hull began to crack further. The storm howled around them, the sky a violent tapestry of lightning and black clouds. Lysera could see the planet's surface now, a jagged valley with cliffs rising like teeth. Trees and rocks were obscured by the storm, but the slope seemed manageable if they could just hold together. Kale adjusted his ship's angle, engines roaring. The human's face was set in determination, jaw tight, eyes locked on the pod. Every movement was precise, every calculation critical. Lysera realized she had never seen such focus, such courage. Humans were capable of incredible feats, and she was witnessing one firsthand. The pod shuddered violently again, and a panel flew loose, spinning past her. Lysera caught it midair, pressing it back against the console. She gasped, oxygen flowing thinly in her lungs, but she kept moving. Failure was not an option. She had to survive. Kale's ship tilted dangerously, shields flaring as another gust slammed into them. The magnetic clamps strained, the energy field flickering under the pressure. "Hang on," Kale shouted. "We're breaking through." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the two vessels stabilized. The pod was securely attached, the storm still raging around them but no longer immediately threatening to destroy the fragile connection. Lysera collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily, her body trembling with relief and exhaustion. Kale's voice was calm now, though still edged with tension. "We're clear of immediate danger," he said. "I'm taking you to a safe orbit where we can assess the damage and repair the pod." Lysera looked at the human pilot, awe in her eyes. You saved me," she whispered, her voice weak but sincere. Kale gave a small nod, eyes scanning the storm outside. "I didn't save you alone, you helped, you're strong, but yes, I made sure you lived." For the first time since the cruiser's attack, Lysera allowed herself to hope. The storm below was still violent, but she was alive. She was safe, for now. And it was because of a human, a species she had only known in passing diplomacy, that her life had been spared. The pod systems began to stabilize slowly, though damage was extensive. Lysera pressed her hand against the console, watching the oxygen levels rise slightly, the alarms quieting. She was exhausted, but she felt a strange warmth, a connection to the human who had risked everything for her. Kale maneuvered the ship skillfully, guiding them into a calmer orbit above the storm. He finally allowed himself a brief sigh of relief. "We're not out of danger yet," he said, "but we have a chance, a real chance." Lysera looked at him through the viewport, understanding dawning. Humans were remarkable, reckless in stories perhaps, but capable of courage, intelligence, and determination that even her own people respected. She had witnessed it with her own eyes. As the storm raged below, the two vessels moved as one, a fragile alliance against the chaos of the planet. Lysera knew that the journey was far from over. Survival was just the beginning. But for the first time, she believed that she could face what came next, and that she might live to see it. The first step in her recovery, in her journey back from death, had begun. And somewhere in the depths of space, a human warrior had proven that courage, intelligence, and selflessness could bridge even the vastest of cosmic divides. The storm below raged like a wild beast, its gusts tearing at the fragile magnetic link that held Princess Lysera's pod to Commander Kale's human craft. Despite their temporary stability, Kale knew they had little time. Every second that passed increased the strain on the pod's hull, already cracked and scorched from their previous battle with gravity and lightning. Kale's hands gripped the controls with white-knuckled precision. Sweat ran down his temple, but he didn't flinch. The pod groaned as if in pain, warning lights flickering violently. Lysera, strapped into the small seat inside, pressed herself against the floor, trying to ignore the sounds of metal twisting. She had never felt so helpless in her life. Every instinct of a royal princess, every lesson in strategy, negotiation, and diplomacy felt useless in the face of sheer physical danger. Kale's voice came through the calm, steady, and firm. "Princess, I need you to brace yourself." "Things are going to get rough." Lysera nodded, her hands clutching the straps of her seat. I'm ready." He wasn't exaggerating. A sudden gust slammed into both ships, sending them spinning violently. Sparks flew from the pod's console, and Lysera's helmet fogged with her rapid breathing. The world outside was chaos, a blur of storm clouds, jagged mountains, and lightning that split the sky like white fire. Kale's craft shuddered, thrusters flaring as he fought to stabilize their descent. But it was clear, the pod could not survive a direct landing. The magnetic clamps held as long as the force of gravity and wind allowed, but the energy field flickered dangerously, threatening to fail at any moment. Lysera's voice trembled. "Commander, what do we do?" Kale's jaw tightened. He scanned the instruments, calculating angles, velocities, and trajectories faster than any computer could keep up with. "We can't land the pod safely," he said, voice tight with determination. The storm is too strong, the terrain too dangerous. If we try, both of us die. Lysera's heart sank. She had hoped for safety, for rescue, for survival, but reality was cruel. She pressed her hand against the console, wishing desperately that there was another way. "There's one option," Kale continued, his tone calm but resolute. "You get free and I absorb the impact. I'll make sure you live no matter what." Lysera's eyes widened. "No, you can't." "I can," he interrupted firmly. "It's the only way. You're the only hope for your people. I won't let this planet take you. I'll handle the rest." Her chest tightened. The weight of the situation pressed down on her like the storm itself. She wanted to argue, to protest, to stop him, but she understood. Humans were remarkable in ways that could not be measured, brave, clever, and willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of another. Kale activated the release sequence, carefully detaching the pod from his craft's magnetic clamps. Lysera's pod hovered briefly, then stabilized as its limited thrusters fired automatically. The human's ship began a controlled dive, angled to absorb the brunt of the storm's force and the jagged terrain below. "No!" Lysera screamed, gripping the console. Tears blurred her vision. "I can't let you do this." "You can," Kale said simply, voice unwavering. "You survive, that's what matters. Live for your people, live for the universe." The storm's fury intensified. Lightning cracked across the sky, striking dangerously close to Kale's craft. Wind gusts tore at its hull, and jagged rocks loomed below. He maneuvered with precision, every movement calculated to buy Lysera a fraction of a second. Sparks flew from his ship's engines, and the hull groaned as if crying out in warning. Lysera's pod floated above the chaotic valley, its small thrusters barely keeping it steady. She pressed a hand to the viewport, watching as the human craft descended toward the jagged mountains. Her chest ached, her mind screamed in protest, but she could not interfere. She realized, with a mixture of awe and despair, that this human was giving everything he had to save her life. The pod's alarms blared, warning of low oxygen and structural damage. Lysera's breath came in shallow gasps. She had never felt so small, so vulnerable, but the sight of Kale, unflinching and resolute, filled her with a strange courage. He was defying death itself, and that defiance sparked something within her, a determination to survive no matter what. Kale's craft hit the lower atmosphere, plunging toward the rocky surface with controlled precision. The engines flared as he absorbed the impact, shielding the pod from the worst of the storm. Rocks shattered beneath the force and a shockwave rippled outward, but the pod remained stable. Lysera's eyes widened, disbelief and relief mixing in equal measure. But Kale's craft was not invincible. The hull cracked under the strain, engines sputtering and sparking. He fought to maintain control, but the damage was severe. Every second brought him closer to the limit. "Commander, Kale!" Lysera shouted through the comm, panic rising in her voice. "Please don't." "I've got this," he interrupted, voice steady. "Just stay alive." "That's all that matters." The pod's thrusters adjusted automatically, drifting away from the chaotic storm below. Lysera's hands trembled as she watched Kale's ship collide with the jagged terrain. A massive explosion engulfed the human vessel in fire and debris. The shockwave rocked her pod, throwing her to the floor, and her heart sank. Silence followed. Only the sound of the storm remained. Lysera's breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed herself against the console, hoping against hope that he had survived. But deep down, she knew the truth. He had paid the final price to ensure her life. Tears welled in her eyes. She had survived, but at a cost she could hardly comprehend. A human warrior had given everything, his life, his future, his very existence, to save her. She pressed her hand to the viewport, looking at the smoldering wreckage below, and whispered a silent promise. She would honor his sacrifice. Minutes passed, but the shock of the event kept her frozen. The pod's life support stabilized slightly, though she remained weak from the previous struggle. Lysera pressed a hand against her chest, feeling the rapid beating of her heart. She had survived, yes, but survival was only the first step. The planet below was still hostile, storm-tossed, and unknown. Lysera activated the pod's navigation system, scanning the terrain below. Jagged mountains, deep valleys, and violent storm clouds stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a treacherous world, uncharted and unforgiving. But she was alive, and she had a purpose now, one that extended beyond her own survival. She had to continue for Kale, for her people, and for the universe that depended on courage and resilience. Hours passed as Lysera piloted the pod carefully, avoiding the worst of the storm and searching for a safe landing site. Her body ached from exhaustion, but her mind remained focused. She thought of Kale's sacrifice, the calm determination in his voice, the courage that had saved her life. Humans, she realized, were remarkable beings, capable of selflessness, intelligence, and bravery that transcended boundaries and species. Finally, after hours of careful navigation, Lysera found a sheltered valley shielded from the storm by jagged cliffs. She guided the pod down slowly, engines flaring to control descent. The landing was rough, the pod scraping against rocks and dirt, but it held together. Lysera exhaled in relief as the pod came to a stop, smoke rising from minor damage but nothing catastrophic. She unstrapped herself, legs trembling from fatigue and stress. Standing in the small cockpit, she looked out at the alien landscape. Jagged peaks rose around her, lightning still flashing in the distance. The storm continued to rage, but here, in this small valley, she had found a moment of safety. Lysera pressed a hand to her chest, thinking of Kale once more. His sacrifice would not be forgotten. She had survived because of his courage, his intelligence, and his unwavering commitment to another being's life. He had paid the final price, and she had been given a second chance, a chance to live, to continue her mission, and to honor his memory. Her communicator crackled to life, faint but functional. A voice spoke through the static, distant but clear. "Princess Lysera, we've located your pod. Assistance is on the way." Relief and hope filled her chest. She had survived the fall, the storm, and the impossible odds. But more importantly, she carried the lesson Kale had taught her. Courage and selflessness could bridge even the vastest distances in the universe. Lysera sat in the pod, exhausted but alive, watching the storm slowly abate. She knew her journey was far from over, but for the first time since the ambush, she allowed herself to hope. The universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but she had survived, and she would not squander the life she had been given. Outside, the storm clouds began to part slightly, revealing a glimpse of the stars. Lysera's gaze lifted, thinking of the human warrior who had given everything to save her. Somewhere in the cosmos, his legacy lived on, through her, through hope, and through the courage that defined humanity. And in that moment, Princess Lysera vowed that she would honor him, not with words alone, but with action. She would survive, lead, and protect her people, carrying the memory of Kale's sacrifice as a beacon in the darkness. The valley was quiet now, a fragile calm settling over the battered landscape. The storm had passed, leaving jagged cliffs and scorched earth behind. Smoke rose in thin wisps from where Princess Lysera's pod had landed, but for the first time in what felt like days, the world seemed almost peaceful. Lysera stirred inside the pod, her body stiff and aching from the long ordeal. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but her mind was alert. She pressed a hand to her temple, trying to organize her thoughts. The memory of the ambush, the crash of her cruiser, and the terrifying descent still weighed heavily on her. But above it all, one image burned brighter than the others, the human warrior who had saved her life. Kale. She closed her eyes, remembering the determination in his eyes, the calm strength in his voice, and the ultimate sacrifice he had made to ensure her survival. He had paid the final price without hesitation, without fear, and without asking for anything in return. The thought of him filled her with a strange mixture of sorrow and admiration. He was a human, a species she had only known through diplomatic reports and legends. But now she understood. Humans were capable of bravery, intelligence, and selflessness that transcended all expectations. Lysera forced herself to move, her muscles stiff and protesting. She unstrapped herself from the seat and stepped onto the uneven ground. The valley stretched around her, jagged peaks rising like silent sentinels. Smoke drifted lazily from the pod, and small fires smoldered nearby. She carefully picked her way over rocks and debris, taking each step with caution. The pod's comm system crackled to life. A faint, static-filled voice reached her ears. "Princess Lysera, this is an allied rescue team. We've located your pod. Hold your position. Help is on the way." Relief washed over her, mingled with exhaustion. She sank to the ground, pressing her hands against the earth. She was alive, she had survived, and she had a mission now, a mission to honor the life of the human who had saved her and to continue the work she had set out to do. As she waited for rescue, Lysera took stock of her surroundings. The planet was harsh and untamed, its surface scarred by storms and jagged terrain. Yet there was beauty in the chaos. The way lightning had illuminated the cliffs, the sharp contrast of dark rock against the pale sky, and the faint glimmer of distant stars through the dissipating clouds. It reminded her that life could endure even in the harshest conditions. Hours passed and the rescue team arrived. Their ships glided over the valley, lowering cables and providing support to stabilize the pod. Lysera's pulse quickened as she saw familiar faces among the rescuers, trained allies of her people, here to bring her home. She climbed into one of the rescue ships, her body trembling but her mind focused. As the ship ascended, Lysera looked down at the valley. The wreckage of Kale's craft still smoldered, a stark reminder of his sacrifice. She pressed a hand to the glass, a silent vow forming in her heart. She would not let his bravery be forgotten. She would survive, lead, and protect her people, carrying the memory of Kale's sacrifice as a guiding light. Back aboard the rescue ship, Lysera was treated for minor injuries and dehydration. Medical droids scanned her body, administering nutrients and stabilizing her condition. Despite the exhaustion, her mind raced with thoughts of Kale, the storm, and the mercenaries who had ambushed her cruiser. She could not rest yet. There was too much to do. Once she was stabilized, Lysera convened with her aides. "We need to regroup," she said, her voice steady despite the lingering fear. "The mercenaries who attacked my cruiser are still out there. We cannot allow them to strike again. We need to protect our people and ensure that such attacks are never repeated." Her aides nodded, their respect for her unwavering even in the face of recent events. Lysera's courage had inspired them, and they were ready to follow her lead. She outlined plans for intelligence gathering, fleet coordination, and diplomatic communications. Every decision was guided by the lessons she had learned during her survival, the importance of preparation, observation, and the value of life. Lysera thought often of Kale during these discussions. His sacrifice was more than a memory, it was a lesson. Humans, she realized, were remarkable not just because of their technology or physical abilities, but because of their moral courage, their willingness to risk everything for the sake of another. She resolved that she would carry this lesson into every aspect of her leadership. Days passed as Lysera recovered and prepared for the journey back to her homeworld. She traveled with her rescue team through the storm-tossed planet, observing the alien landscapes and noting the challenges that future explorers would face. Her mind remained sharp, analyzing terrain, weather patterns, and potential threats. She thought of Kale constantly, drawing strength from the memory of his determination. During a quiet moment aboard the ship, Lysera accessed her personal logs. She spoke softly, recording her thoughts for future generations. "Today I learned the true meaning of courage," she said. "A human gave his life to ensure mine. His actions remind me that bravery is not measured by rank, wealth, or power, but by the willingness to act when it matters most. I will honor his sacrifice by leading with courage, compassion, and determination. I will ensure that his memory lives on." Her words filled her with a sense of purpose. She had survived a near-impossible ordeal, and she had witnessed the best of humanity in action. Now it was her turn to act, to lead, protect, and inspire her people, just as Kale had inspired her. As the ship approached her home system, Lysera's thoughts turned to the challenges that awaited her. The mercenary threat was real, and her people were vulnerable, but she felt a newfound confidence. She had survived against impossible odds, guided by the courage of a human warrior. She knew that she could face whatever came next, armed not only with her training, but with the lessons of bravery and selflessness she had witnessed. The ship docked at her homeworld's orbital station, and Lysera stepped onto the platform, greeted by her people. They had feared the worst, but she had returned alive. Relief and admiration shone in their eyes, and Lysera felt the weight of her responsibility settle on her shoulders. She addressed the gathered officials and citizens, her voice steady and commanding. "We have faced a grave threat, and yet we endure. Our people are strong, and we will continue to protect one another. But we must also remember the lessons of courage and selflessness. A human warrior sacrificed everything to ensure my survival. His actions remind us that life is precious, and that bravery is not limited by species or distance. We honor him by living with courage and purpose." The crowd listened in awe, many moved to tears by her words. Lysera's message resonated deeply, not just because of the events themselves, but because of the values they represented. Humans, she realized, were more than allies or legends. They were examples of what could be achieved through courage, intelligence, and selflessness. In the days that followed, Lysera worked tirelessly to strengthen her people's defenses, improve communication with allied species, and ensure that such attacks would never occur again. She implemented training programs, established emergency protocols, and fostered diplomatic ties, all guided by the lessons she had learned during her survival. She also made a personal vow to honor Kale's memory by sharing his story with her people and with the wider galaxy. His sacrifice would not be forgotten, and his example would inspire generations to come. Lysera visited memorial sites and recorded accounts of the events that had transpired. She spoke of Kale's bravery, his intelligence, and his unwavering commitment to saving a life. She emphasized the importance of courage, selflessness, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. Through her words, Kale's legacy would endure, inspiring others to act with similar courage and determination. As she looked up at the stars from her palace balcony, Lysera felt a deep sense of connection to the human warrior who had changed her life. She knew that his sacrifice had not been in vain. She had survived, and she would use her survival to protect her people, strengthen alliances, and honor the values that Kale had demonstrated so vividly. The universe was vast and filled with dangers, but Lysera no longer feared it. She had witnessed the best of humanity, and she had learned that courage and selflessness could bridge even the greatest distances. She would carry that lesson forward, guiding her people with wisdom, strength, and compassion. And in the quiet moments when the stars shone brightly above, Lysera whispered a silent promise. "I will honor you, Kale. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. Your courage will live on through me and through all who hear your story." The awakening was complete. Princess Lysera had survived, learned, and grown. She carried with her not only the memory of danger and loss, but the enduring lesson of human bravery. The galaxy was vast, the challenges ahead many, but she faced them with renewed determination, guided by the light of a warrior who had given everything to ensure her life. Princess Lysera stood on the balcony of her palace, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy stretched before her like an endless tapestry of light and shadow, filled with possibilities, dangers, and wonders. Her heart was heavy with memories of the storm-tossed planet, the ambush on her cruiser, and the human warrior who had given his life to save hers. Yet within that heaviness was a spark of hope and determination. Kale's courage had changed her forever. The days since her rescue had been filled with planning and action. She had strengthened her people's defenses, rebuilt damaged fleets, and fortified alliances with neighboring systems. The mercenary faction that had attacked her cruiser had not disappeared. They remained a threat, but one that she was ready to face. Every strategy she enacted carried the lessons she had learned from Kale: courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act decisively, even in the face of danger. Lysera convened with her council in the Grand War Room. Holographic maps of nearby systems floated above the polished table, highlighting enemy positions, trade routes, and possible escape paths. Her advisors, seasoned and loyal, waited for her guidance. "The mercenaries are regrouping in the northern sector," Lysera said, pointing at the holographic display. "They are desperate, but we have the advantage. They underestimate our resolve, and they have forgotten what it means to face those who fight for life, not profit." One of her commanders, a veteran named Terran, raised an eyebrow. "Princess, their ships are faster and more maneuverable. Engaging them directly could cost many lives." Lysera's eyes burned with determination. "Kale taught me something valuable," she said softly, though every ear in the room leaned closer. "It is not technology or size that wins a battle, but courage and strategy. We do not have to match them in speed. We only need to be smarter, braver, and willing to act when it matters most. That is how we win." The council nodded, inspired by her words. Lysera's experiences had transformed her from a diplomat into a leader ready to face the galaxy's harsh realities. She would not let fear dictate her actions. She had survived impossible odds once, guided by a human warrior's courage, and she would do so again for the sake of her people. Preparations began immediately. Ships were repaired and upgraded, fleets were positioned strategically, and scouts were sent to gather intelligence. Lysera personally reviewed every detail, ensuring that the plan was flawless. Yet even in the midst of strategy, her thoughts returned to Kale. She imagined what he would have done, how he would have approached the challenge. His example guided every decision she made. Days later, the fleet moved into position near the northern sector. The mercenary ships appeared on the horizon, dark silhouettes against the starfield, their engines flaring ominously. They were confident, expecting an easy victory. But they had underestimated the Xantari and underestimated the spirit of those who had been inspired by human courage. Lysera stood on the command bridge of her flagship, her hands gripping the railing. Her eyes swept over the fleet, each ship ready, each crew member alert. She could feel the tension in the air, the quiet before the storm of battle. Her mind was focused, every thought a calculation, every instinct sharpened by survival. The first wave of mercenary ships advanced, firing energy blasts that lit up the void. Shields on Xantari ships flared as the attacks struck, but Lysera's fleet responded with precision. Coordinated maneuvers, unexpected tactics, and clever diversions allowed them to gain the upper hand. Lysera watched as her fleet moved like a living organism, every ship complementing the others in perfect harmony. The battle raged, chaos filling space with flashes of light and energy. Lysera's heart pounded, but her mind remained clear. She gave orders swiftly and decisively, drawing upon everything she had learned from Kale's example. The importance of courage, the necessity of quick thinking, and the willingness to risk everything to protect others. One of the mercenary leaders, seeing their advantage slipping, attempted a desperate maneuver to trap Lysera's flagship. The ship twisted sharply, weapons aimed directly at her command vessel. Lysera's hands flew across the controls, issuing commands to the fleet. Diversion to Sector 3, focus fire on the lead ship, shield matrix to maximum. The plan worked. The mercenary ship faltered, unable to anticipate the clever maneuver. Lysera's fleet pressed the attack, disabling engines, targeting weapons, and forcing the enemy into retreat. One by one, the mercenary vessels were neutralized or scattered, their confidence shattered by the unexpected brilliance and courage of the Xantari forces. Lysera allowed herself a brief moment of relief as the battle drew to a close. The mercenary threat had been eliminated, their power broken, and her people were safe. The victory was not merely a result of technology or numbers, it was a triumph of courage, strategy, and determination. Kale's influence was evident in every decision, every calculated risk, and every act of bravery. After the battle, Lysera returned to her homeworld, greeted by her people with cheers and celebration. They had feared for her life, but she had returned not only alive but victorious. Her experience had transformed her, and she was ready to lead her people into a new era of strength and cooperation. Lysera visited the site where Kale's craft had fallen, a quiet, windswept valley now marked by memorials erected in his honor. She knelt beside the markers, her hands pressed together in respect. "You saved me," she whispered. "Your sacrifice was not in vain. I will honor you with every action I take, every decision I make, and every life I protect. Your courage will live on through me and through the galaxy." Her words were carried on the wind, a tribute to the human warrior who had changed the course of her life. Kale's memory became a symbol of courage, selflessness, and the power of one individual to make a difference. Stories of his bravery spread throughout the Xantari Empire and to neighboring systems, inspiring others to act with the same determination and moral courage. In the months that followed, Lysera strengthened diplomatic ties, established new alliances, and implemented policies designed to protect the vulnerable. She drew upon the lessons she had learned during her survival, the importance of preparedness, the value of courage, and the necessity of acting decisively when lives were at stake. Her leadership inspired loyalty, trust, and hope among her people. Lysera also created an academy dedicated to the study of bravery, strategy, and interstellar cooperation. It was named in honor of Kale, a human who had exemplified the very best of what it meant to act selflessly and courageously. Students from across the galaxy came to learn, inspired by his story, and by the legacy of the princess who had survived against impossible odds. Through these efforts, Lysera ensured that Kale's sacrifice would never be forgotten. His courage became a guiding principle, shaping the values of future leaders, explorers, and warriors. Humans and Xantari alike recognized the significance of his actions, and his story became a bridge between species, fostering respect, admiration, and collaboration. As Lysera gazed at the stars one evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had fallen from a cruiser ambushed by mercenaries, faced certain death in a storm-tossed pod, and survived only because of a human warrior's courage. That journey had changed her, strengthened her, and given her purpose beyond her own survival. The stars seemed brighter now, filled with the possibilities of the universe and the promise of future adventures. Lysera knew that she would continue to face challenges, threats, and dangers. But she also knew that she was not alone in spirit. Kale's courage, humanity's example, and the lessons of survival would guide her through whatever lay ahead. She smiled softly, a mixture of sorrow and gratitude in her heart. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but it was also filled with heroes, courage, and hope. Kale's legacy had become a beacon, illuminating the path forward and inspiring others to act with bravery, intelligence, and selflessness. Lysera raised her gaze to the stars and spoke softly, a vow carried on the cosmic wind. "I will honor you, Kale. Your life, your courage, and your sacrifice will never be forgotten. Through my actions, and through the actions of those who follow, your legacy will endure forever." The galaxy continued to stretch before her, vast and full of unknowns. But Princess Lysera, survivor, leader, and bearer of a human warrior's legacy, was ready. She had learned the true meaning of courage, experienced the selflessness of another species, and witnessed the power of one individual to change the course of many lives. The universe was hers to protect, to explore, and to inspire. And somewhere in the stars above, the memory of Commander Kale shone brightly, a constant reminder of what it truly meant to be courageous, to be selfless, and to act for the sake of life itself. Lysera turned from the balcony, her steps confident and purposeful. The challenges ahead were many, but she faced them with courage, determination, and the memory of a human warrior who had paid the final price so that she could live. Her journey was far from over, but her path was clear, guided by honor, hope, and the enduring legacy of heroism. In every decision, every action, and every life she touched, Kale's spirit lived on. And through Princess Lysera, the galaxy would never forget that courage, selflessness, and humanity could shine brighter than any storm, no matter how dark or powerful. The legacy was complete. The princess had survived. The warrior's sacrifice had not been in vain. And the universe had witnessed a story of bravery that would echo across stars and centuries alike.